You are the ocean's gray waves. Hi everyone, I'm Hoodie Angel Brandon, and welcome to another Fire Emblem Heroes unit build showcase. Today we are here to prepare the amazing songstress Azura for her upcoming performance. We are here to build our plus 10 Azura. We have waited a long time for this, and I'm very excited. Of course, you guys all know that I'm a huge fan of Fates, and Azura is of course a fantastic character from there, so it's very long overdue that we get her built up and have her join our angel army. I remember back when I first started playing, I really wanted to get her, but I didn't have any luck initially, and while I did eventually manage to get a copy, I never would have imagined that I'd be able to one day plus 10 her. And also, I probably would have thought it was kind of dumb because dancers don't really need those stats. But Azura is indeed an awesome character, and we are going to spoil her anyway and make her part of the team. So I'm very much looking forward to that. Let's go ahead and get started. So Azura is a little bit of a unique case. Usually we are starting these unit build showcases from like +0 or maybe +1 or +2. Azura already has 5 merges on her, so we don't have that much to do because we've gotten copies here and there as we've been playing. But now we have the rest of these, and we're going to start merging her. And yeah, it's just very funny, actually. After 6 years of no plus 10 dancers, I got 2 almost back to back within, I think, like 6 months of each other. So just kind of funny how that worked. But we are going to build up this not so mysterious dancer, and that'll be very fun. Again, she doesn't really desperately need these stats aside from like speed. In fact, if I could just give her only speed, I would absolutely do it in this case. I don't really care about those other stats on her. But she does deserve to be spoiled, and here we go. The arguably deuteragonist of Fates is now plus 10. Very happy about that. So here she is. For a Gen 1 unit and a dancer who has relatively low stats, she actually holds up decently well just looking at her stats here at plus 10. Without any dragon flowers or anything, she has a very respectable 42 base speed, factoring in this speed asset that we have on her. Her attack is, of course, a little sad, but that is fine for a dancer, especially for the kind of build that I want to go with for her, as we will see shortly. But even her def and res aren't atrocious. I certainly would like to pump more of these stats into that speed, but for a Gen 1 dancer, I do think she holds up shockingly well. We also don't need to mess with her traits at all. Plus speed is perfect for her, and her defensive stats don't really matter that much, so it's not really worth using an Ascendant Fleuret on her. And as silly as it sounds, I don't want her doing too much damage, so we definitely don't want to touch her attack either. And we could give her those dragon flowers, but honestly, I'm a little worried about raising her attack too high. So since she doesn't desperately need dragon flowers, we're not going to spend them on her. She is at the end of the day still a more support oriented unit, so her stats don't matter as much as the rest of her build. She is also water blessed, mostly just for theming, although I have considered swapping her to like light or astral blessings so that I could use her in aether raids. But for now, we're just going to stick with the water blessing. Rah! We could definitely give Azura the Mask of Silence. It's very spooky, very scary. It looks like something she would wear while telling scary stories to Sakura. It would be very funny, but realistically, I don't think it's terribly fitting. Instead, I think it would be very cute to have her take our favorite Astral Dragon out and have her join her on her performances. So we're going to go with the Astral Dragonette accessory. For ally support, we're going to leave Azura all alone. I'd absolutely hate to see her end up leaving the person she's paired with when she turns into bubbles at the end of everything. It would just be very sad and very tragic. Okay, seriously, I don't have anyone who I think is a great fit for her at the moment without reshuffling my ally supports around. She would really like to be paired with a hyper-offensive unit that's using Gale Force and initiating to get in, but I don't have anyone who fits the bill for that at the moment that I'm running as a dedicated Gale Forcer. So for now, she's going to stay on her own, but in the future, I may find a good support partner for her. I'm not sure. So in terms of fodder, she does have a very outdated Gen 1 kit. I did give her some skills randomly while I was actually using her as a one-off dancer, but she does need a lot of overhauling. Really the only thing that she can use from her existing kit is Sing. I guess technically she could use Moonbow as well, but not for the kit that I want to give her. So we do need to give her a bit of a makeover, but it won't be that expensive. A lot of this is fairly budget, with only a few premium options that I kind of just picked up without specifically going out of my way to get them. So I think we'll be able to build a pretty solid kit for her without really breaking the army's bank. So the number one thing that is going to separate Azura from our other plus 10 dancer Nils is the fact that she will be able to utilize Gale Force. And so I want to lean into that niche, and we're going to go ahead and grab that for her. And that will be her main special, although she does have that Moonbow and she can run other similar specials if she just needs more damage, but I don't think that'll be a huge draw to using her over someone like Nils. There's so many skills. So, since we are leaning into a very offensive niche with Gale Force, we do want to raise her attack a little bit, and more importantly, we want to give her speed. So we're going to give her some skills that boost those. And we're going to start by getting Attack Speed Bond 3 from Kent. And I guess we'll take Reposition on the very off chance that we want to use her alongside Nils for whatever reason. I don't think it'll ever happen, but hey, free Reposition. But that is just bridge fodder so that we can also go ahead and grab the Attack Speed Bond from Duo Peony. While Unity would be a stronger option, generally speaking, being able to actually capitalize on Azura getting penalized, I think that in her case, just neutralizing them is enough. And again, we don't want to actually get her attack too high, which Attack Speed Unity runs the risk of doing, because we actually need her to be able to double to charge Gale Force without killing the enemy. So taking the relatively weaker attack speed bond is okay, and also the range penalty on attack speed bond versus Unity is much less of an issue because Azura will be running Wings of Mercy so that she can warp to allies. So since most of the time she will be adjacent to allies anyways, attack speed bond having that restriction of being directly adjacent to allies won't be much of an issue for her. As for the second skill from Peony, we probably won't use it, but we're going to pick up Res Cantrip. It doesn't do anything for Azura herself, but with a magical ally, it technically could have some use, and more importantly, it might get a upgraded version in the future, so having it on hand could be helpful, so we'll just go ahead and get that since it is a fairly rare dancer-specific skill. For C skills, we're going to get just some general boosting skills like Drive Attack. And she actually already has Drive Speed. We could get Joint Drive Speed just to further improve her, but for now we're going to leave that because we have some other options we can take instead. Since she is initiating on the enemy with Gale Force, we could actually take something like Savage Blow to help chip down enemies so that our allies can get kills easier, or something like Speed Smoke for the same reason, allowing her to make sure that allies can get their doubles off, or even so that she could get a double on a faster foe after triggering Gale Force herself. But I'm thinking that it would be best to give her attack Speed Oath so that she can raise both her attack and her speed at the same time, and more importantly, with upgrading to attack Speed Oath 4, she'll be able to actually warp, which seems redundant with Wings of Mercy in her B slot, but it could help her reach allies even when they aren't injured, which could be very helpful, and also opens up other options for her B slot, and it just gives extra attack speed during combat, which could be helpful for her. However, instead of giving it directly to Azura herself, I was thinking we would just go ahead and grab it and put it on our rearmed Ingrid, and then she can pass it on to Azura. Because we're already going to be using Ingrid to receive the Arcane Lewin. While we're at it, we'll go ahead and grab Luna and that Attack Speed Oath 4, and that way we get everything from Ingrid that we can, and just get a little bit of extra value from her. And then in the future, Ingrid could pass on Attack Speed Oath 4 to other units as well. So with that, we have a good number of skills ready for Azura to learn, and we're going to be able to build a pretty nice kit for her without spending too much overall. So all that's left is to learn these various skills, and then we will get to building. I almost forgot, we also want to refine her arcane weapon for speed. Just give that extra little boost, and just make sure Azura's got the zoomies. So now we are all ready to build her up, and this shouldn't take too long since you can already probably more or less guess where we're going with this, but let's go ahead and start. First, we're going to equip her with Arcane Lewin, which is a fantastic weapon for her. The slaying effect is great to just make her much more consistent, and she also gets an Omni Boost plus 5 as long as her HP is above 25%, which is great to help balance out her relatively low Gen 1 Dancer BST. She also gets a bonus effect of dealing damage equal to 20% of her speed, and she is stacking speed, so that will contribute a decent chunk of damage for her. But more importantly, it also neutralizes the foe's bonuses to speed and def, and also gives her null follow-up, which makes sure that her doubles will go off and she'll be able to charge her special, so that when she actually attacks, she'll be able to make sure it goes through. This is absolutely fantastic for what she wants to do. We also had the other Arcane Lance as a potential option. However, that Lance does have some issues. It would require us to take null follow-up in the Seal, since her B slot would no longer be open for Wings of Mercy, and it also has the problem of having its special acceleration charged to moving, but warp movement does not actually count for that, so Arcane Lewin is just a much better option for this build in particular, because we are using those warp shenanigans. Next, of course, we are going to take Sing. She is, of course, the mysterious songstress, so using Sing is just going to be much more powerful than reposition or drawback, and is the most important part of her kit. Even if she doesn't end up attacking, she still has Sing as a fallback option, and so she will pretty much always be contributing to the team in some way. Next, for her special, we're going to take Gale Force. This allows her to attack the enemy, and once it's charged, it'll give her an Encore, allowing her to take another action, and then she can use Sing to refresh her ally. Gale Force Dancers are a lot of fun, allowing you to get an attack off and then refresh an ally. I actually like Gale Force chains in general, especially for Aether Raids, although they've kind of fallen off a lot there with the introduction of save tanks. But still, when they work really well. So they're definitely a great option to have on the table. Even if you don't use the ally that you refresh to attack again, they can instead retreat and then use something like reposition or drawback to pull Azura back to safety, opening up a more hit and run playstyle. So I really love how flexible they are. Next, for the A slot, we're going to take Attack Speed Bond. Again, technically Attack Speed Unity would be a bit better, but this is still a very good option that we didn't have to go out of our way to get, and it doesn't run as high of a risk of overkilling the enemy since it only goes up to +7 attack speed. It still has good synergy with Lewin because it will neutralize Azura's penalties to attack and speed to help her get her doubles off through debuffs, And then Luin also prevents enemies from getting bonuses to their speed and def, so that the enemy can't use any penalties or bonuses to try and stop her from doubling, which is just really helpful for her consistency. Next, of course, we're going to take Wings of Mercy so that she can warp over to allies. Eventually, Wings of Mercy 4 would be a bit of an upgrade for her, but for now, Wings of Mercy 3 will work just fine. And then finally, in the C slot, she has a lot of options. Again, we could take Savage Blow to help chip enemies down so that our allies can get their follow-up attacks. She can also take something like Drive Attack or Speed to support, or Speed Smoke to help her allies get their doubles, but we're going to go with Attack Speed Oath 4. It does bump up her attack and speed even higher with the visible buff and also an in-combat buff, and then more importantly, it also gives her a warp effect to help her get in and start attacking, even if the allies weren't able to chip themselves down to 50% to trigger Wings of Mercy. So this will just help improve her consistency, but again, C slot is, as usual, pretty flexible here. Finally, in the seal, we want those consistent Gale Forces, so we're going to take Flashing Blade. She doesn't really have an option here. She technically could run a Special Acceleration skill in her A slot, and then run something like Life and Death or Swift Sparrow in the seal, but with this build that we have now, really the only option for her seal is to take Flashing Blade. So there we go. Look at that build, it's looking very good. Bear in mind, even though her stats look a little low, she is getting +5 across the board from Luin, as well as 7 from her attack speed bond, and then a whopping 9 to attack speed off of her oath. So her stats are actually a little bit higher than it appears at a glance. I'm actually a little worried about her damage. With the oath buff, the bond skill, and Luin all boosting her attack and also giving her damage based off of her pretty decent speed, I hope she doesn't overkill. She actually hits 58 attack, so she'll probably be fine since modern units are so bulky, but we really need her to double to charge the Gale Force. If she hits too hard though, we could swap her oath for something like Joint Drive Speed, but hopefully she just remembers to go easy on the enemies and not start swinging trees at them. Well, no matter what, I'm sure that she will serve. Yeah, at worst we swap her A or C for pure speed boosting skills like Darting Blow 4 or a different bond skill, or Joint Drive Speed. So we can definitely tune this based off of how hard she ends up hitting, and if she is actually underkilling, then we do still have Dragon Flowers to fall back on to actually improve her stats by a pretty good margin, since she is a Gen 1 unit, and get a pretty sizable boost from Flowers. Also, with the 2 warp skills on her, this is actually pretty similar to a build I did in Revelations post DLC with the exclusive Witch class warp skill that I called Zoom Zoom Zora. So this build is a tribute to that, and now she has added Gale Force to the arsenal and just made something even more disgusting than that already was. So I'm looking forward to seeing her in action. Now for our team, we're going to go ahead and bring our good boy Ninja Korin, who is running his Gale Force set with his seal swapped out for Fury to help him chip himself down further and make himself a Wings of Mercy beacon for Azura to warp to. We have also swapped out his Close Call for Spurn, because with Azura warping in, it's actually important that he stays closer to the enemy so that Azura has a chance to actually jump over and get into position to attack the enemy and trigger her Gale Force. In fact, something like Repel might even be better in this case, because it would let him knock bulkier enemies back, and then Azura could follow up that way if he doesn't get the kill. But for now, Spurn is better than Close Call for this specific situation. Next, we're going to go ahead and bring Sedith, who is also running Gale Force, and he can potentially also support with his Spear of Assault and Speed Def Rain, but rather than being a Gale Force initiator, we have him set up to warp in as well, alongside Azura and help support that way, and then trigger a Gale Force of his own, although he can also potentially just use reposition to move Corrin in so that he can start initiating. So he's just kind of flexible in this case. Finally, in the last slot, we're going to bring our dear Professor Byleth, and I was thinking of having him also run a Gale Force build. However, since the other three are all running Gale Force, that means that we can potentially be walled out by bulkier threats. So having someone who can potentially deal with bulkier units like armors with an actual offensive special can still be very helpful in this case. Again, I normally would bring a Gale Force team for something like Aether Raids, where it's optimal to deal with a larger group of enemies. And so I would have some extra units with offensive specials like Mythics, who I could potentially fall back on. But since that's not really a case here, I feel like giving up one Gale Forcer to have a answer for those kind of units is still very helpful. Alright, we are here in Arena Assault to give Azura a spin, and we will see how she does. Another thing about Gale Force chains is that they do tend to work better on squishier units, things like hyper-offensive mage teams that you used to see a lot more often in Aether Raids, teams like Ophelia backed up with infantry pulse mages. But it can still work in other scenarios, again, especially because it does offer the flexibility of being able to play more of a hit-and-run style, but it just does have some issues against bulkier units like save tanks and some of the more modern sword units that run things like Spurn and guard effects can be troublesome for them. So it is something to keep in mind, but hopefully we'll be able to make something work here. So to start, we're going to just go ahead and start moving our units in. We're going to try and start by getting Soren, hopefully. Alright, so another issue is making sure that we get Wings of Mercy off, which is a little bit easier in AR because you have access to things like bolt towers or bolt traps to help you get your HP lowered. But here we should be able to just have Corrin attack Soren twice, trigger Gale Force, and then activate his effect to move in. Now, unfortunately, we can't actually reach with Azura because we moved her a little bit too far back to trigger her oath, but we can have Seteth reposition her in, and she can move in and attack Jamkey. There we go. Now, we can have Corrin move in, and then Azura still has an action to dance him. And we can have him move in and take out Seliph without too much worry. There we go. And now we'll just go ahead and pull Seteth up. Shannon will attack into Corrin, and he's not doing a whole lot between the defense tile and the weapon triangle disadvantage in our damage reduction. But there we go. So Azura was able to swoop in and help Corrin. It didn't go as smoothly as I would have liked, but it did technically work. So with that, we were able to snag a victory. While it wasn't as smooth as I would have liked, it was still a success nonetheless, and it did show Azura being able to show off that Gale Force Sing combo. It wasn't quite the full Gale Force sweep that I was hoping for, but that was probably a more realistic scenario if we're being honest. Again, I do prefer to play Gale Forcers in Aether Raids where you have the benefit of being able to pick your team based off of the enemy. So being able to actually bring in Gale Forcers on a team of units that they can rush in and then sweep before they can counterattack is a bit better for that kind of thing. But Azura, being a Gale Force dancer, can work very well as a generalist supporter as well, being able to combine that support utility from Sing with the offense from Gale Force and that makes her a lot more flexible for general content. So overall, this was still a pretty good showcase, I would say. With that said, she does still have some consistency issues. Bulky save units can be troublesome for her, as can units with guard effects. In fact, she would absolutely love being able to run something like Tempo, and if we ever get a Tempo seal, she'd probably like being able to run that, although then she would lose Flashing Blade. So she would probably like to get Attack Speed Pledge, which will help charge her special in that kind of scenario, which didn't actually exist when I started working on this build. So, oops. But that is something to consider in the far future if we ever get a Tempo seal. But until then, she still works well as a general offensive unit with support utility. So overall, I'm still pretty pleased with her. So as always, thank you guys so much for watching and listening to me babble on while we just built a very fun unit. Again, she's definitely not the most meta, but she is just very fun to watch as she delivers performance upon performance. Anyway, until next time, this is Hoodie Angel Brandon and Azura signing out.